Let's do a recap on chapter 1 of the book of Nehemiah, You Determine Book Study. I think one of the biggest takeaways that we can see from this whole beginning chapter is that Nehemiah laid a solid biblical foundation. He didn't just have this feeling in his gut or in his heart and then act on it. He had compassion. He was drawn to a cause. And then he wept over it. He prayed over it. He fasted over it for days. The Jews had a custom of fasting like once a year. I think it was the Feast of Atonement. But that was not a fast that Nehemiah did that was required. His fast was something that was for a deep need because he knew that God was calling him into action and he wanted to get clarity. He wanted confirmation. He wanted peace. He wanted provision for the task ahead, and he sought God for that, and he trusted him. Now, we got to see the way Nehemiah prayed, which I thought was really powerful because it gives us an example for believers is the way that we can pray. And I think it's really good to start with praise the way he did. He exalted God. He put God on the pedestal. He trusted in him. He proclaimed his name. He gave him worship, and he was remembering the goodness, the power, the greatness of the God he served, the capability of what God could do abundantly more than he could ever ask or think. And then he remembered the promises of the word. And I hope this is encouragement to you to get into scripture, to look at what God's promises are, to see the God of the Bible and know that he is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and he is that for you. So as a daughter of the King, you can claim these promises on yourself. You can call God down into action in those promises that are still valid and true today, and you can ask him and inquire and seek and beseech him and put him in this place where he is being able to facilitate these promises in your life too. And so as we continue to walk this out, one of the really fun things that I have created is not just a 7-day prayer guide to pray each and every day over your life, your business, but also a section for reflection. And then I've also got a bundle that creates a biblical foundation because we need this as women. We need this as moms. We need this as homeschoolers. We need this as women of the word, entrepreneurs stepping into our faith with confidence, clarity, compassion for a cause, and for the capabilities to complete it, even when we know we lack the strength within ourselves. And so this Kingdompreneurs Steps to Success bundle is put together so that you can actually see how to apply it to your life now, because a lot of believers have knowledge of the word, but they don't know how to facilitate it and live it out. And so this puts it into action and helps you step into a season of faith, fulfillment, and power in your calling. So let's look back at the question recap for the end of chapter 1 and walk this out. So the question that starts that whole section is, what do you feel passionately about? And I think this is a really good time to sit and reflect and pray through that. And again, if you want to go to the guides, if you want to walk through what that looks like, it's laid out there so that you can purposefully put this into perspective and brainstorm and walk through and really craft that vision for your calling. But if you know where God has you, write that down, reflect on it, ask yourself what compelled you to be called into that space, what drives you every single day. Having that strong why we talked about before is what lays the foundation and keeps pressing you forward on the days where you feel like quitting and giving up. So then, okay, let's see this. Nehemiah was a man who felt passionately about an issue. And so the challenge was to read Nehemiah chapter 1. Did you do that? So what impression did you get from Nehemiah? When I was reading the book of Nehemiah, I was looking at him and I'm like, okay, he's a cupbearer to the king. So he lives in royalty every single day. He has privilege. He has a place of prestige and high trust. And remember all the things that the book said about Nehemiah. He had to be handsome, poised, knowledgeable, wisdom. He had to be able to consult and advise the king when necessary and asked. And he put his life at risk every single day to make sure that the king was safe. So there was a lot of trust between those two people, between that relationship. And so he was very close in proximity to somebody in authority. And if the king was in a bad mood when Nehemiah went to him, he could have easily lost that position, been put to death, kicked out of the palace, sacrificed all those things because of this driving force that was now in his space, right? So he was somebody who really had to walk in faith. He purposely laid this before God because he needed God to prepare the king's heart. He couldn't go and ask him without that. That took bravery and courage. And so what was this burning issue within him? Remember, he wanted to put a hedge of protection and safety around God's people because they were open for attack. And then he wanted to magnify God's name. He did not want the God of the Bible mocked or looked down upon. He wanted that power put back in that place. And so that was really important to him. And Nehemiah, what did he do about his passion? Well, again, prayed, fasted, wept, all of those things for days. And then he asked the king for provision. He knew he could not do this alone. So what are you stepping into that you need to ask God for help for? And what kind of provision is it that you need? Because without mapping that out, you walk into this blindly. Remember, Nehemiah didn't just assume that he knew best. He didn't assume he had all the resources and tools. He actually knew he didn't, and he needed to go to the God of the universe to provide it all. Nehemiah risks security, comfort, and a life of ease. And if you've been called into any form of leadership or authority, or even as a figure within your home, you recognize that even like as a stay-at-home mom, you have given up the security and comfort of being able to have that extra income coming in, right? Unless you're working a business from home. And even that, you're giving something up to do that, right? There's always sacrifice. And so as you think about that, you are most likely in that exact same position. And has it been worth it? Oh my gosh, I think if you really look at the blessings, you will for sure say yes. And how could you describe Nehemiah's relationship with an attitude toward God? He trusted him as his ultimate authority and provision. He knew God's promises, he claimed them, and he watched as God walked them out with him. So they were like walking together in faith. And so once you have found out what you're passionate about, then you can just clarify that, right? You can dig your heels in. You can walk in confidence. You can seek God for help continuously through that. And if you don't, the encouragement today is to find out what that is. So what do you do to stay informed about the things that concern you? Are you doing market research for your business? Are you tapping into the needs and concerns of your client? Are you shifting the culture of your business to reflect a God-honoring environment? Are you building community? What is it that you're doing to find out what the needs are and how you can meet them through the help of the Lord and through the provision he gives you? And what do Nehemiah's actions tell you about his character? He was humble. He was brave. He recognized the process of putting together a group. He kept his work quiet. Remember, he went out at night when no one else was knowing with it. He brought a couple people with him. He wanted to assess the walls. He didn't tell people about his big plans. And maybe for lack of discouragement, for lack of calling for someone else, you might not be telling other people exactly what you're doing either, because you don't want the hate to come in. People who don't share your same belief are not necessarily going to be able to encourage you along the way. In fact, their thoughts, their opinions, their unbelief, or the fact that God didn't call them, he called you, causes them to think it's not possible, because that's not God's will for them. And so that ends up coming out in a way as a discouragement to you. And you, if you have big dreams, big plans, big vision, there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors, but my point here is to caution you to choose the right ones. Nehemiah was cautious with his circle. He chose specific people to go with him that he trusted, that shared that vision, that had that wisdom that God had put in his path. And he didn't listen to the outside noise, because already when he arrived where he was to build the wall, he had opposition and people against him who didn't want to see him follow through. And so he knew that was going to be there, and so do you. And I want you to be aware of your circle. Who's in that now, and who's discouraging you from stepping forward in faith? So as you're reflecting today, think back to your life on choices you made. Think about the people who are there in your corner, the people praying for you, fasting for you and with you, the people who gave you biblical godly counsel, the people who spoke life into your dreams. Are they still in your life? Or do you need to pray for God to bring new people there? Do you have people before that kind of pulled you out of where you were supposed to be going, that brought disbelief in your heart or doubts in where God would have you? I remember when I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, I got a lot of slack that I was going to have my husband be going to work and I was just going to be home. And that was coming from unbelievers, people who didn't share our same parenting visions, people who didn't share our same belief system, who didn't have the same experience or wisdom or knowledge for what our hearts were for raising our children. And they had no right to speak that discouragement into our lives and how we'd raise our kids. But still, the noise and the constant judgment was hard to deal with. And lastly, we're going to close with this. What's the one thing that you can do this week about what you feel passionate about? Do you need a flame reignited in your heart? You can pray for that. I've had to ask God before to reignite my flame, to reignite my passion and purpose, to give me a renewed spirit, to confirm that I am where I am supposed to be. I almost walked away from what I do here in this space because I wasn't sure if this is what God had for me. And then God began to open doors. And so he is alive. He is present in your needs. He hears you. And so I actually had to take the step of faith to say, okay, I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to press forward. I'm going to overcome. And I'm going to do it, Lord, with your help, your provision. And I had to pray and fast, and I had to weep, and I had to go through the frustrating moments. And then I also had to say, Lord, I need help. So if you need help redefining your purpose too, if you need provision, if you need wisdom, drop your thoughts down in the comments. Let's walk through this together. Let's be community here, the hands and feet of Jesus, so that you can step forward in your passion and your faith the same way Nehemiah did when he had to walk and fulfill this great purpose.